welcome back to my channel. This is a long-awaited monthly book club that is definitely late, but we're not going to talk about it. So I finally got around to finishing the book of the month that we are doing, and it is called Spontaneous Combustion by David F. Feinberg, whichever one it is. I'm going to butcher it anyway. And this book has been a good read, I would say, but it's also kind of hard to explain it because it is a narrative of someone's life, and it's in first person. So to give a real quick background, this is based on the character B.J. Rosendahl. I definitely mispronounced that one. And it's in his narrative, so it's in his point of view and everything. And based on what it says on the back, is a dishy, neurotic, horny, cranky, and adamantly gay hero of some book called 86. Never read it. And essentially is during the 1980s when the AIDS epidemic was really popular, or not popular, but like no one knew about it, so everyone was getting it back then. And he himself tested positive for HIV. Even though he was asymptomatic, he didn't have the equilibrium in a world where it's no longer fashionable and became more alarming to be positive. And he was taking these pills of drugs called AZT, which literally stands for a zillion tricks, because at the time they did not know at all what drugs they were taking. But so basically this book is about, I'm calling BJ, I'm calling BJ. His name is like Benjamin something, and he lives in New York City. He's been there for several years. He's been gay most of his life, or at least came out most of his life, and he had several boyfriends at the same time. He's kind of like a lover boy, but he's also a fuck boy in the same body, because he's the kind of person who's like always trying to be with someone for a long time, even when they're like not good to him. But also the same person who's like cynical in every part of his life, even in his relationships. Like he doesn't believe they're gonna last, but he'll be the first one to make it work out, which is probably not true if you read it, because you're like, oh, he's very cynical in the way he's thinking, but at the same time, he's dating this guy named Richard, who is so rude to him. Like every part of his story, I was like, this man is literally the rudest person I ever met in a book. And yet BJ is like always like delighting him in what he says. It's almost two-faced in a way, but that's his character. That's how he plays himself. And after a while, he either breaks up with him or he moves on, and he has like a phone hotline that he's calling up every day to be like, oh, I just want to hook up. Or he just goes out with the next boyfriend who doesn't want him for very long. But in this book, they say he's hot, so I guess they just don't want him because they all have like at least 3 boyfriends, according to them. But around it's like every chapter is like a year or a month. So like around 1988, I want to say, he becomes diagnosed with AIDS or HIV. And at this point, he had several friends already who already had the AIDS virus. And it was not very known back then what it was caused for or what the treatment was. So they used to just treat them with AZT, which, as I said, stands for a zillion things, because they just throw whatever at it. They used to like give you whatever. They gave like 20 different types of drugs, told you to take them like 4 hours every day for this drug, and then once a day take this drink, and something was a placebo, something else was just vitamins A, and they just call it a day and hope that it worked and hope that your T cells didn't decrease. But for him, he was asymptomatic, right? So he didn't really have any symptoms. He just had the anxiety and worry that came with it. And but having already said this, he also already had herpes before this, which luckily for him only came out when he was like really stressed out or anxious to a certain level. And he was anxious like twice a year. That got him to have like the herpes virus show up. But when he got AIDS, it was bad because he already had several friends who already unfortunately passed at this point. And every friend that he had was at one point either a lover to him or they were a lover of a friend. So he had a friend that he loved, and they just happened to be friends with this other person who became friends with him, and then years later who had AIDS. So it's like sad, obviously, because you do see the process of when he first meets them, how they progress, and then when they have the illness, they usually all have symptoms. He's like one of the few characters in this book who doesn't have any symptoms, but the rest of them will end up in the hospital, and he would talk about how he has to go see them and feel bad because he could never tell if he was seeing them because he felt guilty for not seeing the last person that was his friend who had AIDS before they passed, or because he was trying to hook up with one of their hotter friends at the end, because he's also kind of selfish of a person, but he also feels like immense guilt for the way he acts a lot. He's a very complex person, like everyone is, but I think BJ is very interesting of a character because his mindset is warped by one, how he grew up in a household where he wrote a letter to his mom to say how he was gay, how he knew many people in New York City who were kicked out of the family because they're gay, how the AIDS epidemic kind of changed the way people not only view homosexuals but just view the virus. Like even if you were homosexual and didn't have it, people would just assume you would or you had it, like you just lied or whatever, right? Like literally getting tested for HIV or whatever was almost seen as dumb because there was no real cure for it. So it's like, oh, what's the point of getting tested for it if you don't even know what the point? It's like getting tested for illness that has no cure, no treatment, nothing. And it's like you might as well just live your rest of your life not knowing because there's no way for you to stop it. But he was kind of lucky in a sense because when he got AIDS or when he got HIV positive, he didn't have symptoms, right? But he had like the constant fear that his T cells would decrease, which once they decrease to 0, you basically are gone, right? But he had a chance to have a lot more research during this time because a lot more science and research books were coming out and people were understanding more about the disease. Not to say he was like getting better treatment, he was not. But he was a lot more aware of what he should be doing, even if it meant he couldn't have sex anymore, or he was more conscious of having more safer sex only after he got it. Though for a long time he knew that safe sex is a thing, but until you get like an illness, you don't truly practice what you see or preach. I don't know why it's called spontaneous combustion. I think because more of his life is a combustion. I think it's definitely a metaphor on BJ's life because he had many friends who he knew / dated / hooked up / were friends, whatever, only for a lot of them to be dead. So in one chapter, he literally lists all the friends he had that died within the last decade. So this book is from 1980 to 1990. And spoiler alert, obviously, he doesn't die, or at least he's not dead in the decade that he's in it. And usually the life expectancy for someone who has AIDS is literally a decade. So for him to still be alive is amazing, is great, but obviously every day you're wondering, am I going to survive another day? Half of my friends are gone, the other half are like sick. So it's like, what is the point of, really making more friends? And as I said before, he was already cynical before he had the AIDS epidemic on him. And definitely was cynical before he knew this many people were getting sick. So now on top of that, he is dealing with like his emotional turmoil because he has herpes, and herpes is only really seen on a person when they go into like emotional stress, which luckily for him has never been so crazy for him to not have it more than twice a year. But after he gets herpes, he already has herpes. After he gets AIDS, he essentially goes to more of ACT UP, which is a movement that they did a lot I'm sure like when AIDS was really becoming popular and really becoming more aware back then, that is a lot more protesting and letting people know more about how they can get more involved in the protests and getting more awareness, getting more research, having more funding put for it. And it's a very interesting read. It honestly reminds me of this TV show called Fellow Travelers, which is really saucy, if you ask me. I love it so much. If you never heard of it, it's a TV show, I think on Apple TV, I could be wrong. That came out honestly, almost a year ago at this point, that stars Matt Bomer and Jonathan Bailey. And it was about, I don't know what year, but the 1970s, I want to say. During a time where being gay was considered a crime. Like you just could not be gay, you'll go to jail. And because of that, AIDS was also considered if you have AIDS, then you're probably gay, right? It's just the whole thing. And spoiler alert, skip a few minutes if you don't want to see a spoil. Jonathan Bailey's character does get AIDS later on in the story because the show splits into the past and the present. And the present is the 1990s. And the past is the 70s or whatever year, right? And the 90s is when they have more information about AIDS and more treatments, which wouldn't really be treatments because there's still a bunch of random stuff, but more treatments than they had in the 70s. And the 70s is oh my god, you can't be gay, you can't even talk about being a guy. If you were even considered gay, or if you just hated a person, you can just call up the police or the FBI and say, we think this person is gay, and they go to jail. It was so bad. And Matt Bomer's character, he worked for the government, so he was not the face, but he was really popular. And Jonathan Bailey character was a lower level military official, so they butted heads a lot, and they fell in love, and they fell out of love, and they fell back in love, and and Matt Bomer's character was basically almost the 86, not 86, was almost BJ in his book, because he had the anxiety of not wanting to be having this illness, but he also had the neurotic self of like always going out to like hook up with people. Like in the show, he's hooking up with everybody and anyone who's gay. He's not getting relationships like that at all. Spoiler again, he does get with Jonathan Bailey's character, but he's always told him that we're not going to be together. There's no way, we can't. And it's mainly because of the whole stigmatism of being gay, being outed, because your roommate could out you, the person across the street can out you. Like, you work at a government official, they're the first to like arrest people. So like that would make no sense, right? And of course, his family was not happy with him being gay, which is a whole other thing, obviously. So he never truly saw himself as a real person because of that, or a person who deserves to be in a relationship, which is sad in the show, because Jonathan Bailey only pines for him the entire show. It's actually kind of hot, but it is really sad because he does just like pine for him and really tries his best to be like so hopeful that they would get together, which at some points they do, and at some point they realize like not gonna work out. And it's like, I wonder how this would be if like the stigmatism of who you are and what you guys could do is not like heavily frowned upon. Like, would you guys have stayed together? Would this have been like an actual thing? Because at the end of the show, Jonathan Bailey, spoiler, does die from AIDS, and you don't know who he got it from or how he, like, I mean, you can guess how, right? But you don't know who he got it from, because the entire show, he's been consistently going for one person, while Matt Bomer's character is going for like every guy that he ever saw that looked his way, right? So it's like kind of weird that he gets AIDS and then Matt Bomer character doesn't get anything. They talk about it in the show as well. So I think that became a very big point of mine when I was reading this book, just because I was like, this is very much Fellow Traveler, except this guy works in New York City, but eventually quits his job to join a lot more movements in the ACT UP movement. So like protests against people who were against it, against gay people, against getting more treatment, against research for AIDS and all that stuff, because obviously it's a really bad illness, and obviously a lot more people die, and obviously if there's not good like treatment, it gets to AIDS and then people die, right? Obviously. So it's very, very similar. This is not based on Fellow Traveler. I think this book came out like forever ago, and I don't know if Fellow Traveler was based on a book or show or whatever, but great show if you haven't watched it. It's a lot of scenes that if you're not into sexual things, there's a lot of sexual things, but if you're into it, it's a great watch. Good storyline, does tell you a lot. So I don't really have much about the book. I don't have questions that I set up or anything. I just want to talk about the book because I finished it. But I also think it's very good. And obviously in the wake of the political climate that is every year, every day, you already hear that a lot of people think that homosexuality is becoming a crime almost in the wake of many people's eyes. And just because they don't understand it, they suddenly think it's bad when we have worse things to worry about, when certain people don't get prison time when they're supposed to. And here we are talking about someone's sexual lives, like especially when you apply for jobs or whatever, they tend to ask you now, like, what's your sexuality? What do you identify as? And it's all seen as research for the company, so they can know who is actually applying for their jobs. But at the end of the day, if you don't get the job, why do you need that research? And it could very well be a quick denial because of it, which obviously not always true, right? Most jobs probably do just want your data for free. But at the same time, if it's like a required question on a job application, you start to question really hard yourself, what is the purpose of you knowing what my sexuality is? And I think it just becomes more apparent that the more people care about these little things, the more people are fixated and they hate it. If they love something, they don't fixate as hard for it. They actually just say it's fine and move on, or they go to like the next Fox News outlet thing. I don't even hate Fox News. I just think sometimes they go a little crazy with things. But I do think this book is a good read. I don't know if it's educational per se. I mean, if you want to know more about the AIDS epidemic, there are probably better shows and movies to watch and books to read, but it's a good read. It is a spin-off of the book called 86, which is why they said it. I don't know what 86 is, nor have I ever saw it before, so I didn't know who this character was, but it's a good read. I did pick it out of a bookstore that I got 2 years ago, and I never looked back. And it's a little broken up, to be honest, but it was free, so I took it. But that's all I have for you guys today. Don't ask me why it took me forever to finish it, but I did. I had life. So I will see you guys in the next monthly book club that will hopefully be out on time, knock on wood. So I will see you guys next time, and peace out. Okay, bye. I gotta go.